coastal alder, which is widely spread across Alaska, especially where the fishery activities take place. And so by dropping the moisture again to about what the pellet moisture is, we were able to play with the proportions of how much fish and how much dry alder we could do in order to investigate the possibility of actually gasifying this waste stream. And using that process heat, that essential heat, to ideally offset the cost that candidates have in order to actually do the operation. And so we created a series of experiments where we actually optimize the amount of oxidant air that needs to go through the biomass, the maximum amount of fish that we can introduce into this in order to get the maximum amount of heat towards the end. And the study was surprising in a way because when we did the initial laboratory work before we actually showed up to the gasifier, we did heating content. And the heating content, we were not expecting any surprise, and we didn't get any. The higher the moisture, the less heating content we had because water absorbs heat. So we walked into this lab thinking, all right, we're going to run these experiments, and the ones that have the higher heating content, they're just going to blow. Well, because higher heating content meant to have a higher amount of fish, we basically figured that those that had the highest amount of fish were just we weren't even getting a flame. Lo and behold, we got a very good flame. And in fact, the result of the entire analysis was that fish, because of their entrained, their intestines and everything else, they also have oils and fat. That fat produced sufficient excess heat into the system to offset the moisture, upwards of about roughly 20%. And so out of this mixture, we can actually shove in about 20% fish, all of this waste, and get an absolute beauty of a flame.
Pretty much it would only be, useful not for running internal combustion engines because it's going to, for the most part, sooner or later, kill it. But you talked about using it as far as for the heat and the flame itself that it produces for heating water, the in-floor heating for radiators, and then as well as we kind of touched on that real quick was the steam part, the external combustion. How would that system kind of conceptually look like?
An external combustion engine, again, terrible efficiency. You're going to ask me about electricity. Well, we have direct thermoelectric conversion. Once again, efficiency is terribly low. You need a lot of thermal mass in order to get a return on your investment. So smaller systems like these are kind of procurement. There is a negative return on investment with the size of gasifiers. So oddly enough, most people think that if you're going to gasify a bunch of biomass, you need a massive gasifier. That's not the way it works.
You want a bunch of single?
Yeah, exactly. You just put them together. Okay. Because the cost of actually engineering and building all of those things doesn't pay off. So there's a negative return with size. So you can add them, or at least current economics suggest you add them versus try to build bigger. And so for the homeowner, you're essentially looking at much smaller systems. And because they are much smaller systems, you have a thermal output that may limit the amount of electricity you may be able to produce outside of running a generator, which you run the risk of ramping up at short, medium, or long term. But it's almost guaranteed that at some point you'll run.
And it doesn't matter really what kind of feedstock you use as far as like.
I mean, if you keep very low moisture, if you do very good quality control, then
it'll take longer, but it's still eventually going to happen. So unless you have a whole backyard full of, free generators or whatever, or engines that replace it, it's going to be not as
where deep pockets. But that being said, again, there's enormous interest in doing this. Big interest in doing this. But we're limited so far to kind of guaranteeing its use for, I don't know, 20 days, 30 days, something like that.
So I was just talking about the external. I mean, I know.
Oh yeah, sorry. So the external combustion process.
I found that kind of interesting because I mean, I know that they're not. I mean, there's a reason that we don't use them anymore.
Yes.
But as far as someone who just is kind of like out in the countryside and has the time and or expertise to do it.
Yeah, the risk that you have there is because it has very low efficiency. You're going to run through enormous amounts of material.
Mm-hmm. So it's going to be
for the same output. Yeah. Right. And so you're essentially going to have almost a constant stocking, which remember locomotives?
Yeah.
The same thing. You had a poor soul that was it. That was the job all the time. So you're going to have somebody doing basically the same thing, feeding the monster constantly. You can mechanize it and try to do other things, but as you start creating those systems, you start spending more.
And the more systems that you're adding on, the more problems that can
potentially. So it's all possible. You can definitely do it. Again, for the YouTube generation, you can do anything in 15 seconds or 1 minute or 2 minutes.
Yeah.
But it's very different in reality when you actually have to run it for days, months, or if you're truly relying on the system, you have to basically assume that it will run constantly for years. And so you're not really going to be able to pull that off. You're in reality, if you're going through those troubles, then don't use steam, use decompressed ammonia. Okay. So you can have a working fluid that will boil at a much lower temperature than water, with less need for heat, because water requires enormous amounts of energy in order to turn into steam. Most people don't know that, but it does.
But with from what I've seen of those steam powered, is that a lot of it's leaking out and leaving the system. So wouldn't you still have to keep on the decompressed ammonia, or is that a closed system?
No, it's a closed system. Okay. It's basically running a refrigerator backwards.
Okay.
And in the prior to condensation, so going from kind of vapor ammonia back to a liquid ammonia, so the cycle starts again. You put a little generator. You basically put a little turbine in the ammonia. And under those conditions, it doesn't have to push the density of power to push a very large generator. So you can get some output electrical output.
Yeah. This is going to be a lot longer. It makes an already inefficient system a little bit less efficient.
Yeah, but you're essentially using a low heat source in order to produce electricity. And so you can do that. Organic Rankine cycles is basically a general analogy for those kind of systems. And they can work well. They basically will get you some electricity with the advantage that depending on how you design part of the system for part of the year, and last year is blood cold, but for part of the year, you'll be able to redistribute that heated fluid essentially for heating purposes of your home. But there isn't enough energy in the system to produce electricity and enough heat to actually run off completely off the grid with a simple system. Okay. So at some point, be that for electricity or for heat, you're going to have to add something to the mix other than simply gas.
You have to have a hybrid system of multiple things because I always think relying on one thing is always best to use a multitude of things, but that you're not putting as much stress on or trying to get too much out of one system.
Right. 10,000 BTUs to play with, average for biomass. That's all you have.
Mhm.
So you can use all those and direct them towards producing electricity. That's great. But if you're going to try to produce electricity and then heat up your water system or heat up your home or heat up something else, then you can bring in BTUs from somewhere else, which simply doesn't work. Oddly enough, the gasification gas has higher BTU value. Again, it's oddly enough for those that don't necessarily understand what a chemical process is, but the original biomass being big and lighting the match, as I explained, it goes through that entire process.
Mhm.
So the BTU value of a gram of whatever the equivalent of the wood will be able to heat up a certain amount, certain volume, because it has to transform from this very big molecule to the volatile smaller ones. The gasification gas is already the smaller one, so more volatile, more BTU.
Okay.
So you do the chemical transformation, ultimately the gasification gas has a greater punch, which again is one of the advantages you can pipe it and then take it somewhere else. But still, bigger punch is less than half of natural gas. So you're still not going to be able to do as much as you possibly can with the natural gas ability.
Yeah, you're definitely going to be, getting that whole hybrid energy system, and that's just being part of it. It's still you're going to have to downsize your electric use,
Right.
very much. But as far as for running off, just a few LED lights in your house or whatever,
Yeah.
low efficiency high efficiency type things like that. But it's not going to be the appliances. You're not going to be. For the average person,
as long as you don't have a microwave and
coffee pot.
yeah, or blow dryer, which I don't use obviously, you're off. You're off to a good start.
Mhm.
But if you rely on a microwave, or if you rely on a coffee pot or anything, you're toast. You're basically not gonna have the performance you're expecting out of the system. You're likely going to overwhelm the system. Now, electrical systems like these, which is an off-the-grid system, will just shut down. And overload, and run down. And that's it. In the gasifier, you won't. It simply just will stop. Right? But the gasification process will continue. But whatever it is you're powering using the gasification gas is just going to stop it. So then we have another safety issue, which is you're still producing the gas.
What to do?
Now what?
Yeah, so you definitely, it would be something you'd have to be very competent in understanding what you're doing.
Yeah.
Before you go ahead with, I'm just going to throw this on the back of your house.
And make sure that it's not in your house.
Yeah.
Because then if that happens, then the gas is going to start collecting. And then it's going to start leaking. And then it's in your house. And that's a very bad thing because you're producing basically toxins. If you're in hell.
It's like sticking your exhaust pipe in your